Welcome, listeners, to episode 43 of Future Secured. Now, today, when cybercrime doesn't respect borders, neither can law enforcement. Mark Rysanek is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police's Cyber Liaison Officer for Oceania, representing Canada's cybercrime enforcement efforts across Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands from his base in Sydney. With over a decade of leading Canada's cybercrime investigations and setting national enforcement priorities, Mark is going to share some of tomorrow's cyber threats today, from AI-enabled crimes to ransomware as a service, how they're evolving faster than traditional law enforcement can keep up. Today, we're going to explore why Canada has a cyber liaison in Australia, what's coming next for cybercrime in our region, and how the line between prevention and prosecution is blurring in ways that could reshape cybersecurity strategy. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. Thank you for joining me as always, Jason, and over to you for the first question.
Thank you, Tommy. Great introduction again. Mark, we were very impressed with your presentation you did with Team Cymru a couple of weeks ago up in Sydney at Atlassian. One of the best prezos I've seen, the way you interwove the Canadian pieces in there. The only thing I was surprised by is you didn't get maple syrup in there somehow. With all the stuff you had with ice hockey, and that's something you've got to get in there. But yeah, give us a bit of a background that Tom sort of alluded to at the top there. It's you've got the Canadian Mounted Police Force here working with the AFP in Australia. How did that come about? What's happening, and sort of give us some background around that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. Both good to see you. Thanks very much for the kudos on that presentation. I can't say I wasn't nervous. I'll say that I was. It was pretty impressive crowd. Some pretty brilliant people, and the maple syrup will be definitely in the next one. So look, about 20 plus years ago, I found myself working in the government of Canada as a public servant in a fairly bureaucratic role. I was behind a desk. I'd like to think back then young or youngish, and wasn't really wasn't really loving it. I enjoyed having the employment, but I certainly wasn't loving kind of behind the desk every day. And I'd finished university. I kind of was looking at, wow, this is going to be me for the next who knows how long. And before university and even through university, I was in the in Canada's Armed Forces Reserves, and it was a great experience. It helped me pay for school. I have friends from life from it, but I think what I started realizing, I was kind of missing the camaraderie portion that comes from that type of work. And so, look, I came home one day. I was relatively newly married, and told/asked my wife if I could potentially put in an application for the RCMP, which was a pretty dramatic shift from what I was doing at the time. And with her blessing, put in the application. Back then, it was, as it is now, still an arduous process. It's a lot of steps that you complete before you are potentially selected. And even then, and now, what that really all meant after months of application is I got sent to the training center in Regina. If you're not familiar with Regina, it is almost dead center in the country. And what it will have is some of the more brutal winters that Canada can produce. And there I got sent just at the start of winter for what is a 6-month training program. The same program exists now. So it's 6 months. It's unique. It's policing. It's as you can appreciate, there's a lot of history in the RCMP that's woven into the training program. It has a little bit of a paramilitary feel to it. You still do some marching around. There's inspections, and it was awesome. I mean, it was tough. It was fun. It was all the things you would think it is when you slap together, young men, young women, and start working towards that policing career. Not without risk, not without some adventure to it, because you really only find out towards the end of the 6 months, if they'll even pick you, and more importantly, where you're going. And I was lucky in that I got posted to a place called Surrey in British Columbia. Fantastic place to start a policing career, a big city style policing. You have all the tools you need, the resources, and I found that camaraderie that I think I was missing from when I found myself just doing that kind of paperwork. Did frontline policing in Surrey, loved it, met some amazing people, friends to this day, mentors to this day. At this point, my mentors are either retired or starting to retire. So it's a different feeling from what it was 20 years ago, but some absolutely fantastic people. And cut my teeth in policing, as we all do in frontline policing, where you're really, you spend your day in the community with the community. For sure, you see a side of the community that is largely not visible to the public, but that's really why you do the job. From frontline policing, moved on to more specialized policing back in Ottawa. Protection policing, some international policing, organized crime policing. Um, Started really building that career away from frontline policing. Again, really lucky, and I think that's a theme that I look back. Certainly, as I sit here with Sydney, I can say that I've had tremendous luck throughout my career. I had great opportunities developing through. I got to in early kind of 2015 or 20, even before 2014. At that point, I again had this itch for really operational work. I was thinking of returning back to British Columbia, kind of more the epicenter of operational work in Canada. I'd actually applied to a job. I had a job secured, and I had somebody come to me and say, listen, the RCMP is going to start a cybercrime program, and you may want to think about putting your name to that program. And I remember at first scoffing at it, going, no, listen, I'm going to go to some high speed Gucci, really criminally street driven endeavor, and this sounds very much like behind a desk and paperwork. And I have to say again, just grace to some amazing mentors, a couple of key people that were in my circle who said, well, what you might find with more time in an organization, time I have now, is sometimes being at the start of something is good, especially in government. Being at the start of a program line is good. And so I took that leap of faith and never looked back. It's been fantastic. I walked into the cyber crime unit in the RCMP in 2015. And at that time, there was only 2 or 3 of us in the unit. And that was great. It allowed me to start molding something, had a little bit more ownership. When you're starting something, you're building it together. That's quite exciting. At that time, it felt also like we were building the plane as we fly it. I hate using that saying, I know it, but that's really what it was like. But that's pretty unique in policing. Policing, I'm sure you can appreciate, is it's process driven. There's guidebooks for everything, and this allowed a little bit more flexibility. Had some success. Was able to really find challenge in cybercrime policing that I didn't think existed. It's far more challenging than it appears from the exterior. And as the RCMP program started to evolve and grow, so did our international footprint in cybercrime. And I applied for a post in London, UK, and was again very happy to be selected for that. So in 2019, I came home yet again and had another discussion with my wife, a theme throughout the career of how would you like to move? And when she said, okay, where? I said, well, London, UK. It was yeah, absolutely. So landed there in 2019, a very different role in that you're external to the organization while still being part of the organization. Fantastic. I think I really credit my time in the UK of kind of advancing everything I know about cyber went on fast forward. There are some very capable government agencies in the UK, including the National Crime Agency, some amazing private sector partners through that. And it really is a place where you come in one way and you leave, you leave, in my case, and I think for others, you just leave way better. I was expecting to leave, and shortly towards the end of my tour there, I got a phone call, and somebody saying, well, we're going to expand yet again internationally, this time into a different part of the world. And would you be interested in opening up a cyber office in Sydney? And I remember thinking, this is going to be a conversation with my wife that'll be different than all the other ones before. And had that same conversation of, hey, would you like to move again? And this time it was Sydney, Australia. There was a little bit of a almost like a pause in that you'll appreciate there's some distance between Australia and Canada. But it was, again, an absolute yes. So landed here in 2014, August 2014, and yeah, phenomenal. I think it's in my mind the perfect place to land and work as the RCMP. My Australian law enforcement partners are maybe a little bit more like the RCMP, and so there's these natural pathways. A lot of the processes are the same. A lot of the goals are the same, and so yeah, that's me. Been here for a year now. Really immersed into how Australia does things, but equally now have had the time to expand into my wider region, New Zealand and the Pacific Islands, which has been um, for me more growth and education, learning about that region, learning about the different players and stakeholders in the region. And so yeah, that's me. That's what brought me here, is that kind of journey. I think you'll find, again, with most of us in cyber policing, absent a few of the real specialized units, you start in front line. You don't really know where your career is going to go. You spend a bit of time through different crime commands, and then if you're lucky enough, you get a chance in cyber. And I've not seen anyone leave cyber. People will leave for promotional reasons or whatnot, but it's quite rare. It's one of these crime commands that when you're lucky enough to get a spot into, you recognize how fortunate you are and how rewarding the work is. So yeah, hopefully it stays.
Yeah, and I think one of the stories you shared, that's a great background, and the weaving in there. There is a lot of similarities, obviously, between Canada and Australia. Yeah, from personality wise, and a lot, and
Yeah.
probably similar to the UK. We do get our humor and our personalities are very much from UK based. But and you've been to the UK now, you've been to Australia. And I think when you shared your story, one of the interesting things I found was we sort of think we're pretty disparate with our police forcing here, having, the Australian Federal Police, say, and then our state and territories, to say seven different sort of police. But did you say you got something like 157 different units,
Yeah.
or somewhere around that number in Canada? Is that
Yeah,
right?
I think the exact number now might be around 149 or
Oh, wow.
145 police
Mm,
forces, different services at different levels. It's a very big country, as is Australia.
mm,
I think we've just taken a different, I guess, historically, a different evolution in that policing growth where we haven't regionalized forces. Now, again, the RCMP kind of serves as that regionalized force. So, what's unique to the RCMP is we'll take on the same mandate as the AFP, for example, in that federal environment, but we also start in patrol policing, where we are the police of jurisdiction in many communities. Most of them are small and remote communities. I was lucky in going into a city center, but yeah, it's a very different model. I am at times envious of the Australian policing model, which because there's only the 7 state territories and the AFP above. Um, Things can appear, again, I see it from the outside. It can
mm.
sometimes appear to just be easier to coordinate, but the Canadian landscape is definitely a big one and lots of players.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you shared on, Dave, you could do, it was a story about the insider threat, really, from government, and having to sort of work cross border with the US, if you
Yeah.
can. What parts of that you can share? Maybe a condensed version. But Tom and I found that very interesting. Just how you had to sort of bring him to justice, and all the tentacles that were going out in various jurisdictions across the globe. So I think that'd probably be a good story for our audience
Yeah,
to share if you wouldn't mind, Mark.
absolutely.
Mm,
So that in that case, which that was an investigation out of our Toronto office and our project Lunar, and not unlike other cybercrime investigations that the teams in Canada undertake, where we'll have an offender or an individual in Canada who's committed offenses both in Canada, but has equally committed offenses elsewhere. And sometimes that includes the US. And then you get a number of competing interests into that. If there's one thing the RCMP is good at, it is that international deconfliction. So in that case, we have the RCMP as being the primary investigative unit. Um, but in order to advance that investigation, there needed to be help from 2 or 3 of our provincial or municipal partners who have that jurisdictional coverage. The the relationship with the FBI, which is a strong one, again gets stakeholded and managed by the RCMP, and then internationally as well through pathways such as Europol or the Dutch police, or in my case at the time through the UK. So yeah, a lot of coordination gets involved inside Canada. That definitely is an area where the RCMP will put its foot forward and take on that role. We have a national coordination center. So in the case of Lunar, for example, everything kind of comes into a center. It can be coordinated through there, but it definitely is something that we are used to in Canada. And in cybercrime, you learn on day one that it will be international engagement on everything. That can be fast, that can be slow, that can be a source of fruit and of evidence. It can also be a source of frustration. In the case of Lunar, it worked really well. The coordination, in particular with the FBI, was fantastic. It was there was a lot of sharing of information that led to the successful outcome in that case.
Yeah.
It was an interesting case too, because it was a great example of insider threats, and we often hear about how this is one of the biggest issues facing companies, organizations, and governments. But there often aren't a lot of great examples around that. And I can't pronounce the guy's full name, Sebastian or whatever it is. I was talking to another Canadian cyber founder this week about that story as well. I think one of the challenges too in Australia is we have a similar government, we've got similar privacy rules, and that was one of the challenges that was faced in actually uncovering this guy and his ability to kind of stay in the system.
Yeah.
So I mean, are there any bits of that story that you can share with us today about?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Certainly from what's publicly accessible. So Mr. Vachon Desjardins, I believe was the last name, was identified as somebody who was an affiliate from NetWalker Ransomware, but at the same time, during that investigation, was identified as being employed by the government of Canada in an IT role, and that brings obvious risks with it, and raises concern across a number of lines, including on our side from a policing line, but equally from the government side. Flags would have been raised in terms of what can the individual access and what were they accessing. And to your point, was it a case of an insider threat? Did he seek his employment primarily to exfiltrate information, or was this a case of somebody who was employed by the government but was committing criminal offenses outside and apart? I think that's really tough to assess when you're in the middle of an investigation. And to your point, Canada has extremely robust privacy rules and a pretty strong privacy regime, and so it becomes a very delicate balance to not only pursue the evidence and to see if we can put a case together, but equally share enough with the partners, in this case within the government of Canada, to help that assessment come along. And I think one of the things that we take as a learning point from that investigation and from some others, insider threat comes down to motivation. You have to be able to assess motivation. And if you can establish the individual's motivation for their employment, as well as their motivation for outside employment, that really helps that assessment. I think in the case of Lunar, I'm not the authority on that investigation, but I think one of the things that came clear on early in the onset was the motivation for his employment wasn't to seek information. He wasn't motivated to be an insider threat. And so now the risk was lessened, and it became one of, well, could it be an opportunistic insider threat? And I think you have to appreciate that balance of, as you're progressing an investigation, you're keenly aware that suspects, particularly in cybercrime, will start to become wise to the fact they're under investigation. And what you'd be concerned in a case like that is, as the investigation is kind of building steam, as the individual might come to learn that they're under investigation, will that actually prompt them to be more of an insider threat than they normally wouldn't? In other words, are they going to look at their potential future, go, I'm going to find myself in police custody here, one way or the other. I think I might be looking at extradition. What do I have to lose? And that becomes a really delicate balance of how aggressive you can be on the police investigation side, and not lead to a point where you tip an individual off, and then they kind of look as a last resort to steal from the inside.
I think the motivation part you mentioned was very interesting. One of the CISOs that Jason invited along works across a global organization, and she was sharing at the event not long after you spoke how she was speaking to all of the managers and asking them to actually go and get in the actual room with their
Yeah,
employees. A
yeah,
little bit off the the North Korean kind of IT workers and
yeah.
stuff like that. It's how important is it these days, with these globally dispersed teams to actually be able to ask that question around motivation. Why are you here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, that's kind of strange to hear that from a policing perspective, because ultimately we come into our careers highly motivated. I mean, you're probably asked 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways before you get through police academies of any kind. Why are you doing the job, and why did you apply, and what is it that you're looking to get out for it? So when we see employment that, like, much to your point, when you hear, yeah, there's people who work and their bosses never really asked them why they wanted the job, it doesn't feel natural to us. Now that's normal. That there's probably different ways that police and IT workers get hired, but yeah, absolutely. I think that when we look at insider threat and some of the training we do, that it really just comes down to, have you had a chance to talk to the folks that are underneath you and ask them why are they employed? And what you might find is something will stick out. There's probably a baseline industry in every, or baseline answer in every industry, and something will stick out, and that just starts that. Is there more to it? Is there a need to be concerned? And it may also identify the obvious, right? Somebody who says that they're motivated by the cause or the product of a company might be good. It might also be something where you go, well, wouldn't the answer be you're motivated simply by the remuneration, which is not a terrible answer either. So yeah, it's something that, we look at and go, that seems like an easy first step.
Yeah, I think the thing is that you do notice, Mark, and a lot of people, not just yourself, have sort of, no matter what career you come into, have almost sort of sometimes accidentally fall into cybersecurity.
Yeah,
So it's sort of just become an evolution of whatever you're doing for work, you get in there. But as you sort of said at the start, it then becomes almost part of you, or you sort of get that bug for cyber. And I think a lot of people that pick it almost are similar people to doctors or nurses. You are looking to protect and save people, like a police officer. You're looking to protect people and protect people online. But it does seem to be getting out of hand, and you would have noticed as well with AI in particular that these phishing emails, and
yeah,
you can see now with voice cloning and AI being used to clone people's identity, that it's actually getting a bit hard to pick. What are you seeing as sort of trends and shifts
yeah.
from your side of the desk, back across, not just here in Australia and our region, but across the world?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that AI has. I hate to say, it almost feels. I don't want to say defeated, but
Mm,
it started to feel in cybercrime policing like we were really chipping away. We understood,
making some
moving away from
progress.
response
Mm,
based. We were looking at criminally enabling services and prevention, and we're like, okay, I think we've steered ourselves in the right direction. Now, give us a few years, and all of a sudden, this AI thing has come along,
mm,
and you sometimes sit there and go, "Oh boy, this is going to fundamentally change things with such pace that it is going to be incredibly challenging for all of us." I think private or public sector to figure out how to respond. We are
mm,
definitely seeing AI starting to come through, in different business lines. Not only cyber, but cyber will be the first to really get fingers deep into it. The first kind of problem sets that we're seeing now are coming out of some of the more heinous stuff. So out of the child sex exploitation materials, and where AI is getting into that. And look, already it is causing, I think, policing worldwide to go, well, how will we combat this threat? And
mm,
and what are the tools you'll need? What are the legislation? And how can we do this knowing the pace at which it's going to grow forward? Secondly, as you mentioned, on the what we call kind of the high volume cyber stuff. So your phishing emails, your SMS emails, or smishing that we knew, or you would know from before, were kind of threat actor coordinated, and certainly they had tooling to kind of enhance their ability. But now it's an absolute X factor to them. We know this. That tool is equally an X factor to law enforcement, but I think it's a bit of a race in technology. And we're, I've been doing this for a long time. I know very well that the criminal element will co-opt and use technology faster than we as law enforcement can learn how to use it, and that's because they have all day to do this, and we don't. But it's definitely another one where there's a lot of international work around how can we use AI to push back on that high volume crime.
And how do you
And
find it
then,
in a policing environment, Mark? So I was just going to
yeah,
say that, if you think about, and this is
yeah,
across the community, but as a police officer now coming through, and it would have been different to when you came through,
yeah,
but I do know a couple of police officers that work here, and I know
yeah,
teachers, and these sorts of things aren't covered, right? So, like
yeah,
as if you've got someone in the community comes and rocks up into a police station in Australia
yeah,
and says, "Hey, I've just been ransomwared, or
yeah,
I've been phished, and I've lost money." How, is there training? And I'm probably talk from a
yeah.
Canadian side, but I don't see it here in Australia. Is how are
No,
we handling that? Because it was an attack one every 8 minutes from report. Now it's one every 6 minutes, and that's what's reported here in Australia. So it can't not be something that the police are getting calls about. I know for a fact that
no.
I've had friends or people in business that the first person they call, well, straight away is they'll call the local police. Hey, I've had money stolen. How's that handling, or have you seen changes there with regard to how officers are being trained in how to handle those sorts of situations as well?
Yeah, I think there's, and look, we all try to push training down to those people who are receiving the calls, and
Mm,
recognizing there's a delay. By the time the front line is usually the ones pushing upwards, saying, "Hey, we're getting calls on X or Y. What is this?"
mm,
And then there's this time to create training and formalize it, and then have it always put back to that front line, or to the area that's responding to it. I think with cyber and definitely AI, what makes it challenging is how quick that needs to be turned around. And in fact, truthfully, by the time you get training programs established and formalized and returned back to the very folks that need it, oftentimes the
us.
program has evolved further.
Mm,
So I think we're lucky in two ways. One, the folks that are dealing with those calls on the front lines, I hate to say it, they're going to be just a touch younger than you and I. And to
mm,
that extent, they're a little bit more digitally savvy. They're coming into the job already somewhat exposed to the technology. And in fact, it's something that potentially we don't look to as a detriment or an asset. We just look at going, look, the folks that are coming in are coming in already a little bit more digitally aware or cyber aware. And so we just need to enhance them a little bit more. We have to get that training to them quicker, potentially less formalized, potentially a little bit more responsive. But you're absolutely right. It is a challenge to be able to respond to those training needs because of how quick that 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 problem set is evolving. With ransomware, if we use that as an experience, you're absolutely right. It went from calls being received at the front line, going, "I'm not sure what to do here. I don't even know if it's a crime. Somebody has called me about a computer problem," and so we had to very quickly get messaging to our response areas to go, "It is a crime." Now, what can you do with it in frontline policing? Let's try to get you guides. Let's try to work on that. I'm happy to say by now, and I think you'd see the same in Australia, the ransomware response is actually pretty fluid and pretty good. We're now
mm,
looking at that next evolution, that AI enabled, particularly in fraud. And you're absolutely right. In that area, we're trying to get the training out. We're reliant upon a generation who probably themselves are a little bit more skilled than at least I am. But it is a gap. It's a continual gap.
mm.
How about across the Pacific? So this is something that we've seen, is quite a challenge. I've travelled in my TV career around a lot of these kind of countries, and their digital maturity is a
Yeah.
long way behind the law enforcement maturity and stuff like that. So, what has it been like for you to be exposed to that? And then, kind of as a second part to that question, Australia, like Canada, has some very remote communities and
Mhm.
some very big gaps in digital literacy that kind of provide cyber criminals a very large opportunity. So, yeah, just curious as to what you're seeing here and what you're taking back, those kind of learnings to Canada.
Yeah, yeah. So I look at the Pacific Islands, and the way I've seen, and I've had the opportunity to go to a few of the Pacific Islands, and you're absolutely right. It's these areas no different than Canada, in which everybody has a device, typically a phone, and the access to the internet now is easier each day, as they're able to access internet, whether that's through Starlink, whether that's through broadband SIM. I mean, the internet's there, the phones are there, but you are right. It's that next phase isn't quite there yet. It's starting. It's in pockets, but there is certainly a lot around using devices well, and lots of focus being put at the younger generation. And there are some great programs through the AFP, through the Pacific Islands Chiefs of Police to really start helping communities get to that area of digital literacy, digital safety. But it is still a big area, a big landscape, and a lot of phones. And yeah, I think when I speak to the Pacific Islands, to my policing partners there, what I hear is just explosive growth in fraud, in 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 crimes using technology, which maybe wasn't the case not too long ago. And all of a sudden, crimes are being committed using the internet, and now they're in a position where they need to respond. To your point, some jurisdictions, they don't have legislation. Some may have legislation but not dedicated teams. And even those who do have dedicated teams, look, if you're a cybercrime investigator anywhere, you're a capable asset, and policing will want to use those assets outside of cybercrime as well. So it is definitely a big challenge. I think the good news, and I just came back from Pacific
Mm.
Cyber Week. There's a lot of movement in this area. There's a lot of people, private sector, public. Like, there's a lot of people. It's not something that isn't aware. Everyone's aware. Everyone's trying to work in different ways. That's part of my role as well, to offer out some capacity training to the law enforcement partners to kind of help them get ready for what I think is coming. In terms of Australia, yeah, it's amazing how parallel the two countries are. And I look at some of our more remote communities, and Australia definitely has remote communities. I think ours might just be colder by a pretty significant
Oh,
factor,
yeah.
but same challenges, right? There's
Mm.
challenges of getting to technology, and once that technology is in the community, it's a fantastic thing, but it also brings with it less fantastic things and threats. We know that education is probably the best way around it. We've learned, and I would imagine my Australian partners would say the same thing. Enforcement isn't going to be the solution to a lot of this. It is in the prevention area. It's in the education area. The AFP have a gold standard program for cyber prevention. We're modeling a similar product in Canada. You're right. You're absolutely right, though, that these programs now need to be established and offered and moved into those remote communities where we've got to do a better job of getting there and making those programs available. Otherwise, a year from now or 5 years from now, you and I could be talking, and we'd be talking of a new threat, which would be, yeah, the misuse of this technology and the harm it causes amongst young people in these more remote communities. So it's definitely something that deserves more attention. Again, good news. I think we all recognize it. It's just getting the resources to take on the programs we wish.
I think
Yeah.
that was Brendan Dowling's last tour of duty. I think at that one too.
Yeah.
He had his cool shirt on. Did you get one of those cool shirts as well, Mark? That
Yeah,
he had
it's
on there?
something that, again, coming out of Canada, and you hear pretty quickly, oh, you're going to Fiji, you got to get a Bula shirt. You're like, get a
Yeah.
what? What do I need? And hey, not terrible, not a terrible way to dress, a pretty relaxed, formal way. So yeah, happy to bring the Bula shirt back home if some need.
Yeah. It's the way Tom usually dresses. I was surprised he wasn't wearing it
There you go.
for this episode.
No, I love the Bula shirt. Fantastic.
Yeah, there's some cool cultures. I mean, I remember going to Kiribati though once, and that was quite a challenging space there. It's almost disappeared underwater,
Yeah,
and trying to put government infrastructure in there, anything just enabling the lives around there is a real challenge.
yeah,
Just little switch now to ransomware. So this is just getting bigger and bigger. You can't arrest your way out of a ransomware epidemic. There's obviously got to be so many different kind of touch points here. And the Australian government's put in some new legislation, mandatory reporting
hmm
around ransomware. If you make over $3 million a year and you've been hit, one of the challenges is that this has come in because they just aren't getting the right kind of data or snapshot of what the problem is.
yeah,
We see Verizon, Mandiant, the ASD kind of talking about this challenge, and I know only a portion of this is responsible for law enforcement, but how do you go about like chasing down what is a transnational kind
yeah.
of crime environment, and what does that look like over the next few years for law enforcement in the West?
Yeah, so if I look back at my experience, when I got into cybercrime in 2015, 2016, ransomware had started, and I think our approach, and I think that was the same to many law enforcement agencies around the world. It was what we knew how to do. We respond to things, so we responded, and we responded to the first one, the second one. I think after a few responses, you start recognizing, well, hold on, this isn't working. We keep responding. We're we're spending scarce resources well after an event has happened, trying to trace our way all the way back to identify who did it. Ultimately, our goal is the who did it, not always how they did it, maybe a little bit of why, but policing is about apprehending the individual. Um, it took us a while to evolve away from that. And I think, anyone who's a little bit reflective about how law enforcement evolved through that, it was probably collectively just enough. Hold on, the resources have been spent, but what can you articulate as a success afterwards? And they were pretty light. And so, as a community, we started moving away from responding to ransomware to, well, can we start degrading that environment, and can we start working on some of the enabling infrastructure? What is it that these threat actors need to carry out a ransomware attack, and can we take that thing away? And that's better work, and both Canada and Australia are heavily involved in these kind of long-term projects that identify a particular piece of infrastructure, a particular enabling service, and then go to try to remove it. Things like criminal forums or particular networks or bulletproof hosters. I still think that while that's good, and we're degrading the environment, to your point, it's still happening. It's probably still growing, but we don't really know absent that mandatory reporting. And that last bit will hopefully help kind of give us a full picture of how often is this happening, what impact is it having, and more importantly, is anything that we're doing having any impact? Because if not, well, let's quickly change directions yet again. I think if I could have command of everything, it would probably be um, looking again at the assets. I think that's one area that is really tough, but we know from policing and history in policing is if you can take away the ability to earn profit from a criminal venture, less people will take on that criminal venture. There's no money to be made, less folks will do it. I think with ransomware, there's still a tremendous amount of money that can be made, and we need to work a little bit harder collectively. That includes with private sector to find ways to make it less profitable. And there's some really hard challenges in that. We know that you know none of the proceeds from ransomware stay in our relatively good jurisdictions. They move offshore really quickly. They move into jurisdictions that can be difficult to recover assets from. And around that stems a lot of international law and regulatory bodies, and you need a lot of people to be motivated in the same direction. And while law enforcement may be that way, we know that there's other players that maybe not as motivated. So I think ransomware isn't going away. I think we are probably going to see a third evolution where not only are we going to work the enabling services, but we're really going to have to start looking at, can we find ways to make the assets recoverable, and can we make ways to make it non profitable? I think you'll look at some jurisdictions have even tried to pass legislation around not allowing ransomware payments, trying to tackle the profit side of the equation from there. And that's probably one way, but I think there's many other ways that we can work together on that. If we look at what's going to happen in this region, particularly in the Pacific Islands, I think they're on that front end of that wave. They're going to go through the same wave we've gone through, both Canada and Australia, where they'll be responding to it. Over time, they'll realize responding is not going to bring you much success. And then they'll be faced with, well, what's the next evolution? I look at that part of my role as advocating on look, this has been my experience. This is the experience from Canada. You may want to start looking at enabling services, or again, more on the prevention side, and working with your businesses on, do they have good cyber hygiene? Do they have 2FA? Or just try to prevent, because once you're responding to ransomware, you're very, very unlikely to succeed.
Mm. Yeah.
Got one last question for you, and I guess it's around the evolution of a global payment system. So cash made criminal organizations, it was kind of easy for them to hide cash. Then we all started to drop cash, and then you were able to digitally track payments globally and stuff like that. Now with Bitcoin and other digital currencies, it's opened up this whole new kind of opportunity for people to again hide all these kind of transactions. Just in Australia, we recently saw a lot of the ATMs that were sitting around in cigarette shops. All of a sudden, they've been obviously used for kind of laundering money, cash, and now they've kind of as that has become a greater awareness, obviously the companies then have had to do something and have pulled them out. So how do you see the police forces adapting again to this new world of kind of digital e-currencies, and what is providing cyber criminals to be able to move money around?
Yeah, it's a massive challenge. We spoke earlier about training challenges. Well, you can imagine the challenge you have in law enforcement and in getting officers trained and specialized in this kind of really bespoke area of this kind of crypto fraud, international money laundering. I mean, it's not easy to get somebody up to that level of skill for a variety of reasons. Not only is the training probably really tough, you got to really want it. You got to be a really specialized individual to get into that type of work. But I would think that if you're in a policing organization and you're really good at crypto analysis and fraud and tracing, you're probably a very coveted asset, and you're going to have opportunities in a number of crime types. And I'm not even speaking of the opportunities that may exist for those same people outside of policing. And so that is a continual challenge, and it's one that I had a chance to see it firsthand in the UK. It was something the National Crime Agency was really good at, was putting a lot more effort and work around getting investigators, getting a small core of investigators really good at being able to do that portion of the work. Because to your point, what they get swamped with is investigators coming through going, look, I've been running an investigation for X number of months, and what I can see is that the funds have been converted to crypto, and then it disappears into this massive numbers I don't understand. Make it understandable for me. Tell me where the money's gone to, and tell me what I can do. Well, that sounds really easy, but you and I will know that's complicated work, and being able to do it at an evidential level is even harder. So I think that's a massive challenge. I think this is going to become, with the AI coming, with what that's going to do for cyber enabled fraud. And we see already right now how many Australian victims and Canadian victims fall prey to crypto investment scams or romance scams or any of the scams that ultimately end up being converted into crypto. With ransomware, which was always crypto based, I think we're about to find ourselves under tremendous pressure to be able to much more quickly be able to identify where proceeds are, where they've been transacted to, but then recover them. And we know that that's tough. We know that if I use Canada as an example, once the victim's money has gone to an exchange that's outside of Canada, even if it's a compliance exchange that wants to work with us, there's international law in terms of how we can access that evidentially and help the victim. I'm not speaking even of decentralized exchanges or those that may not be fully lawfully compliant in other jurisdictions. So that's a big problem. That's probably one that needs a lot of collective work at some pretty high international levels to start recommending legislation and regulation. But that's equally where I think you'll find myself and my policing brothers and sisters coming to private sector, looking for partnerships, looking for essentially unashamedly looking for help. Going, look, I'm the one facing the victim. I'm talking to the victim or victims, and I need help. I see the money leaving. I understand what the criminal element is doing. We all want to find a way to return those assets or sever those ties. But yeah, it's a bigger challenge coming, I think, because I feel like we're going to get swamped with it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, we thank you for coming on. It's
Yeah,
a shame. It was sort of Chatham House rules when we had it last time, Mark. So you were able to talk about ice hockey and
yeah,
fights and the Canadian version of a Bloody
Milk in a
Mary and all the
bag.
other stuff, right? Yeah. So we might have to keep that for a part 2 and just get you to do that presentation again. But
no
we really
worries.
appreciate you being able to disclose what you did.
Yeah,
And yeah, it is a difficult and challenging thing for all of us, isn't it? Is that it's not like a crime that happens in a country where you can get extradition so easily to get someone
yeah,
to come back, even if they go interstate or something like that. It's with where the crime is coming from and from the places. And we did at that event look at some of the locations around the world and how they are doing these attacks.
yeah,
And they're quite simplistic, unfortunately, in their nature. It's just through a WhatsApp, and they're
yeah,
sending off a private Zoom link or something like that seems normal. The social engineering and all those other aspects to it, you've just got to be on your toes all the time. And we constantly say that to people: the more layers of protection, even just starting
yeah,
with the basics, as you mentioned, with multi-factor authentication, updates when available, password managers and the like, or strong and unique passwords are just the basics that a lot of people still haven't instilled. And if they did, a lot of the cases you look at probably wouldn't happen if we even just had a couple of extra layers of protection. So thanks for all your knowledge. And we'll sign off here. I'll let
yeah.
Tom do his sign off. He opens up perfectly and close it down. But I just wanted to say
Awesome.
from us and from the audience, thank you, mate, for coming on.
No, thank you
Yeah.
for having me. I'm looking forward to Tom's close. And I will say this: I'm definitely ice hockey will be close to my heart, but I've now watched league rugby and AFL, and I'm there's
He's a convert.
yeah, there's some contact being made there. So yeah, pretty happy to
That's
be able to
right.
watch sport here.
And the odd fight breaks out there as well, not as much as ice hockey, but you do get the occasional biff somewhere on the field. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end. There's some strong lads
that's
out there.
right. Yeah.
I can, yeah, just as a side note, I used to do the sideline camera for rugby league, and
Oh
there's a
wow.
shockwave when they hit each other.
Yeah,
You can feel that. But yeah, so we're not too far behind with the ice hockey kind of violence, but it is a bit more regulated these days. It's got to do with the kind of traumatic brain injury stuff that's been coming up.
yeah,
But look, thank you so much for your time, Mark. Thank you as always, Jason. I think touching on the AI challenges in the Pacific, and really finishing up there with the digital currency challenge
yeah.
for law enforcement has been fantastic. So you can find Mark on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for being out in Australia and the work you're doing. It's really, really important. So we really appreciate that.
No, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and yeah, I'll send you a picture of me squeezed into the red surge. So
Lovely.
The crowd looking forward to that. Thanks, mate. Thanks, Tommy.
Thank
Cheers.
you.